Welcome, Coleman Report Live. Used to be Coleman Report Office Hours. Lance Sexton, former Deputy Director, Little Rock Commercial Servicing Center for SBA. Lance, welcome.
Hey, it's good to be here, Bob. I wanted to take a brief moment and say hi to my good friend Angela Cotton that is on today with a record crowd for this edition.
Hey, Lance and I have been doing this for a couple of years. The first iteration was for our office hours training. We would have a format where people could ask us questions. We talked about the news of the day, and we've toyed with the idea of opening up. We have well over 100 people online, so a couple of ground rules. We respect your time. We're going to get right to it and give you the top news of the day. Obviously, we're going to talk about 159. Look, just some formatting issues for those of you who are new. Take a download of this. You get a certificate for attending the office hours as part of training. Regulators, SBA ask you what you're doing. I would keep track of these in a file, have HR keep track of them. We also give you a little outline. You can make notes. You can file those away. Lance and I spend time on learning how to teach adults. So we're very cognizant of your time. We're not going to waste your time. We'd like to have polls. This is anonymous. This isn't NASA stuff. We're tracking it. But it just gives an idea of the flavor of the audience, also for Lance and I. And how many written workout plans have you developed with an SBA borrower? Lance, why are you asking this?
Well, Bob, we've got a situation where we've had several rate increases. Most participant banks are starting to see borrowers who are experiencing more stress. And I think that for a lot of participant banks, they think immediately move into liquidation. But if you read the SOP 5057-2, there are so many places, Bob, where it says we need to find a way to allow the small business to repay the loan. And workout plans are certainly one of those ways to help the borrower get back on track, to be able to repay the loan. Workout plans do have to be written. There are a handful of requirements related to it, Bob. And ironically, we are doing a webinar next week to help you understand how to do a written workout plan.
For those of you who answered less than 50%, good for you. Lance and I have been predicting, guess what? There will be another economic downturn. We are at all-time high performance levels for small business lending, for SBA lending. Delinquencies are low, charge-offs are low. That will change. We're not going to tell you when, but we're going to tell you there will be another downturn. Right, Lance?
Well, the thing I want to encourage all of our participants in this to understand is the time to start getting your toolbox of servicing skills in line is prior to a downturn, not during the middle of it. So let's certainly reach out and get training and look at the SOP 5057-2 and know how you can take care of those SBA borrowers.
The second poll question is a topic near and dear to Lance's heart, and that is, hey, we can have a workout plan. It doesn't have to go to liquidation. It can go back into regular servicing, which is the goal. Have you had that experience?
Bob, probably one of the proudest moments in my life, the first workout plan that I developed with the borrower. It was a rather large SBA loan for the bank I was at that time. It worked as we wanted it to, and the borrower ended up making on-time payments for 3 months in a row after the workout plan, and we were able to put it back in regular servicing. And that's the objective of good SBA servicing within your portfolio. If you do have a problem loan, develop a workout plan and get them back on track. Get them back in regular servicing.
Little known fact, if you have to repurchase it from the secondary market to do the workout, whether it's partial payments, full deferment, whatever, once you get it back to regular servicing, guess what? It is perfectly legitimate to sell it back to the secondary market. Correct, Lance?
That is correct, Bob. Now, a lot of it depends on how it's bought back from the secondary market. As we all know, when a loan does go into liquidation, either the bank, the participant bank, you buy it back, or SBA buys it back. But it absolutely, if you have a loan in your portfolio, it goes into a workout plan that was sold in the secondary market that you buy back. The workout plan works as agreed. It goes back into regular servicing. You can turn around and resell it.
The reason why a lot of you are here is for the 159. One of the things Lance and I are going to do, in fact, we did it yesterday. we asked a survey and we asked the question, how long does it take to package certain dollar amount loans and dollar amounts? Please go back to yesterday's Coleman report, fill out that survey. We're going to publish it for the industry. But just out of curiosity, how many hours should it take to package a $50,000 loan by the lender?
Well, Bob, and I don't want to go too deep into this, but the new 159 that was released, there's some interesting language in in the release that would cause you to need to be able to answer this question.
That's right. Just out of curiosity. What do you think about those responses, Lance?
I'm not surprised that they're all over the board. One of the discussions, my boss has been in SBA lending for a long time, and I really respect her opinions. And we were talking about this yesterday, Bob, and anybody who's been in SBA lending for a long time knows that, you know, a $500,000 loan and a $50,000 loan may take the same amount of time.
Whoa, you're going off script on me. Let's go to the next poll question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Bob.
You don't follow the script. Same question for $1 million. And the reason why we're asking this is we want you to start thinking about it. The 159 does demand in the future for all loans that you need to put down the hours. So we're trying to come up with some industry benchmarks. We will publish this probably next week, but I'm just trying to get an idea of what the audience thinks at this point in time. Interesting. I thought over 30 hours to be a little bit more, Lance.
And guys, we're in process of putting together a detailed webinar on how to handle the new form and how to document. And I'm sure we'll talk about that a little later, the timing for that webinar. But we want you to be able to properly document this. I know there's some things that were in the release that are kind of interesting, but you're going to have to be able to indicate how much work was done.
Joseph, go back to those. Can you go back to the poll results? I think what this shows, there's a lot of uncertainty in the industry of exactly how long does this take. And SBA is now demanding of us that we go to the next level of justifying those fees, whether it's a $50,000 loan or in this case $1 million loan. We're going to have to justify those hours and what the hourly content is.
Well, in the days, Bob, of charging $24.99 with no backup, those are over.
Who did that? Hey, let's go to the questions. Julie asked the question. Lance, we have an equipment purchase for the business. We have an invoice stamp. Do we have to have proof of payment made by the borrower for the amount of the invoice? Let's assume she bought it at an auction and we have it cash and we have it stamped. But do we have to source those funds 60 days prior to improvement, prior to the funds being paid? We're not borrowed.
Technically, Bob, the SOP says if you've got an invoice marked paid that you've met the requirement, but as a prudent lender, I think you want to source those funds with a canceled check, a wire transfer, something to back up where the money actually came from. Assets can be injected as part of the equity injection. Two things you have to establish is the value of the assets, which the invoice itself does. The other thing is that the ownership of the assets, and that's why I think it's important to source the funds that were used to pay the invoice. So I do think you need to have proof of the source of funds. Again, that could be a canceled check from the borrower's bank account, and then you can throw in a couple of bank statements to show the money was there. But I think it's prudent to document the source.
Number one source of SBA 7(a) guarantee denials is lack of documentation for equity injection. That's why what Lance is saying is more above and beyond what you should be doing, so SBA does not question that you have documented that equity injection. I believe we... Go ahead, Lance.
Especially, Bob, if you have a early default loan, one that defaults within 18 months of the final disbursement, or in the case of a line of credit, 18 months of the initial disbursement. If you have an early default loan and there is lack of proof of the equity injection, SBA can make the presumption that that was the cause of the failure of the small business.
I believe we have another email question from Scott. There we go. Basically, the question is, I don't know what the question is. So here we are. Equity injection. Let's assume the pro forma balance sheet reveals sufficient net worth and reasonable liquidity and debt to tangible worth. Do we consider all of on the balance sheet for equity injection into, say, the acquisition of a building or a additional equipment? How do we verify that? What do we do when we have equity in the balance sheet and we want to show additional equity for the acquisition of real estate, Lance?
Well, of course, the SOP 50105J on equity injection reads when you have an existing business, you can take the existing current balance sheet. Guys, you can't go back and get one from 12/31/17. You need a current balance sheet, and then take the new project and develop a pro forma balance sheet. And what it's looking for is a debt, an equity position in the company, a net worth in the company, and the pro forma balance sheet of a minimum of 10%. And it's like we talk about in every webinar, the SBA SOP establishes minimums and maximums. And it doesn't mean that you as a prudent lender might not require more. But I think in this case, Bob, my response was it's an existing business. If they have sufficient net worth and then you develop a pro forma balance sheet, you're going to be fine. You're going to be able to prove the necessary equity with that pro forma balance sheet that you've developed. And it's also important to note the credit memo is such an important document. Your credit memo needs to talk about how you took the current balance sheet, you developed a pro forma balance sheet, talk about the numbers and talk about how the equity position is sufficient.
And the underwriter must make sure that sucking that cash out of the business does not crash the borrower's cash flow. In the 1920, the underwriter is certifying that there's sufficient working capital to operate this business for the next 12 months. So this is perfectly fine as long as the underwriter says, hey, we can take this out. It's savings, it's cash that was stashed, but it will not crash the company's cash flow. You're mandated to do that. Otherwise, you're going to have an early default and Herndon's going to be all over your analysis. Hey, if you have questions, shoot them over to Lance and I. We'll address them on the webinar, on Coleman Report Live now. We always get 2 or 3 fascinating questions every week, so shoot those over. You can change the name to protect the innocent. Let's talk about the news of the day. Buried in the form was this tidbit. SBA now will require you to document all loan packaging fees, even those less than $2,500. Further, SBA is saying you need to break that out and you need to justify an hourly rate for those functions. Lance?
Well, I think the most impactful thing in the new release, Bob, is it said there can't be a standard fee. And so many participant banks historically have said, okay, if it's under 2,500, we don't have to report it, so we can charge 2,500. And I'm not saying that you can't still charge 2,500, but what SBA is saying is if you have 10 loans and you charge 2,500 on all 10 loans, that is a standard fee. SBA is looking for you to justify the fee that you're charging based on the amount of work that was necessary to package the loan. And again, I'm not going to go too deep, Bob. When we do the webinar, I'm going to try to make sure and give you the tools and the information to properly document the new SBA Form 159.
We will be publishing estimated hourly rates that the survey will reflect. And remember, you get to calculate overhead. There's internet, there's desk, there's insurance, and you can calculate that all up. I would sort of start as a base point with your law firm, whatever your paralegal is charging you, a couple $100, $150, couple $100 an hour. I think you can certainly take that. What SBA wants, they want to get rid of the flat $2,500 for each loan, whether it's a $50,000 loan or $1 million loan. And actually, I think it behooves the lender to start doing this because you're going to be able to easily exceed that $2,500 as long as it's reasonable, the borrower accepts it, and you document it.
Bob, I do think that we kind of get lazy at times and we do charge a standard fee. And in many cases, Let's say you have a borrower with multiple affiliates. There's a lot more work involved, and it may be worth a $5,000 packaging fee, but sometimes we don't do that because we don't want to have to document. So again, we're going to try to give you the tools and the knowledge to do it properly.
SBA will allow you to go up to what level, Lance, for packaging fee? What's the cap?
You could do 30 grand. Now,
we're not recommending that, but SBA will allow you to go up to 30 grand.
In my wildest dreams, Bob, I can't imagine one being 30 grand, but I will share with our participants, I've done a lot of SBA file review throughout the United States, and I have looked at an SBA file where there was a $35,000 packaging fee.
Yeah, and so the takeaway on this is whatever the dollar amount, you're going to need to start documenting. You need to come up with an hourly rate and read that it's not in the notice. It's in the 159. The notice says we're not going to go standardized, but the 159 says you got to do it and you need to put it in the file. And this is going to be effective November 1. Hey, we got some questions on this. Let's go into this. Carolyn asked, regarding the 159, SBA has always reserved the right to review fees at any time and require a refund any unreasonable, impermissible fees. Correct, Lance?
That is true, Bob. And the new 159 does have certifications that the fees were reasonable. You as a participant banker, when you sign it, you're certifying that the fees that were charged were reasonable. SBA does reserve the right to go back in and say, no, those are not unreasonable, and the refund on those fees is going to come from the bank, or it could come from another agent if the fees did not go to the bank. The thing that I don't think SBA is going to start showing up and looking at every file and looking at the 159 and asking for refunds of the fee, but I do believe that when they come out with a new form like this, what happens when SBA does an on-site, off-site review, Bob? The 159 is going to get looked at.
Yeah, I love these questions. Kimberly says, does this apply to consulting fees or just bank packaging fees?
It applies to both. Any fee charged to the borrower in the process of underwriting and closing an SBA loan, it applies to both.
And the lender gets to sign off on those packaging fees. If the packager is saying, I'm charging a $10,000 consulting fee, the lender is the one who has the reasonable test to sign off on that. So you are the gatekeeper for that borrower. Usually the packager will say, I'm doing consulting, I'm doing some additional financial preparation, I'm doing projections. But it's the lender who says, no, this doesn't make sense, you can't do that. And the lender's the gatekeeper. Exactly,
Bob. And I think the tricky part of it is you still don't have to submit itemization of fees when it's under $2,500, but that's not taking away the requirement to document.
Ethan asked a great question. Can you have a cap on the fee? If so, if there is enough work to charge $4,000, but the agent chooses to cap it at $2,500. Well, of course, Ethan, yes. The agent can do that, but the agent still has to document it. And I think a best practices is if that loan packager, that loan agent is breaking up these fees, I want that submitted because guess what? The lender's certifying that these fees are accurate.
And guys, the one thing about the new 159, it says that if you have loans that are in process where you have the old form, you're still okay. You can use that. Any new loan that comes in, you're required to use the new 159. And on November the 1st, it doesn't matter. November the 1st, you have to use the new form regardless.
Aaron asked a great question. Aaron, it seems that this won't allow us to issue a term sheet with the packaging fee listed since you really won't know until you've gone through the packaging phase. How do we handle that situation, Lance?
Well, your term sheet's going to give an estimated closing cost, estimated fees in most circumstances. I don't think it's going to keep you from issuing a term sheet.
Yeah, and remember, Aaron, we'll be publishing next week from your survey. This isn't Coleman. This is what the industry says. we're going to say, hey, this is what we feel our estimated fees for a $50,000 loan, a $350,000 loan, a $1 million loan. So I think it's perfectly permissible to take those as the average, come up with your hourly rate, and just asterisk say this is an estimate based on industry surveys. So I think that's fine. And I think those are the 159 questions. So this is the takeaway. November 1st, you need to document everything. You need to document by an hourly function. Lance, I want you to do something very quickly for me also. And also you need to tell me what are permissible packaging fees, Lance?
Well, you can't charge for completing forms. Packaging fee can be underwriting, different aspects of underwriting and closing an SBA loan. But if you put down completing an SBA form 1920, that's not going to be okay. There's still a lot of gray area, Bob, in what actually is a packaging fee. Those of us who have been in the industry for a long time know that there's a lot of work that goes into getting an SBA loan. My friend Angela, who's on here, works with me on closing loans, Bob, and you know, she can absolutely concur that it takes a significant number of hours, irregardless of loan size, to get an SBA loan put together. The SOP is pretty clear, and the release is pretty clear that there are a lot of fees that do not have to be reported on the 159. Again, what we're going to do is try to clarify what you can and can't do in the webinar and make sure that you're compliant in your reporting.
Lance, I guess the question is, how detailed does the lender need to be? Can the lender simply say, I have 20 hours at $175 an hour? Is that sufficient?
Well, I think you have to identify different parts of the process, Bob, in putting together an SBA loan. Part of it may be underwriting, and you're going to have an amount of time for proper underwriting of the SBA loan, a number of hours and a fee, but you need to break it down based on different parts of getting a loan from initial contact with the borrower to the closing table. I don't think you can just lump sum and say we spent 20 hours at this rate. I think it's going to be necessary to break it down into underwriting, document preparation, closing, different aspects of getting a loan to the closing table. But I think there's going to have to be some detail. I don't think you're going to be able to just say 20 hours, $100 an hour, $2,000.
I want to talk very briefly about referral fees. I promise we will not go past 10:30. We respect your time. This also covers referral fees. The lender has to certify these referral fees are reasonable. What's a reasonable referral fee? 1% of the gross loan amount, 2%, 3%, 5%? At what point in time does SBA take exception to that referral fee?
Bob, I fall in line with the max fee amount of 30 grand or 2%. Something under that's going to be acceptable. I've seen astronomical referral fees in an SBA loan package. I think SBA is going to take exception to that and might indicate that that's an unreasonable fee. But the SOP clearly talks about, you know, fees charged to the borrower do not need to exceed 2% of the loan amount or $30,000, whichever is smaller.
Now, remember, these are the fees paid by the lender, so the lender can pay more than $30,000, but SBA is going to scrutinize that to make sure that that isn't built into interest rate, it isn't built in that that's being passed on to the borrower. That we're not there yet, but I mentioned that may be on the horizon. Fees have always been a hot topic for SBA. They certainly don't like to see huge fees being paid to business development offices or also for referral fees. SBA has been very clear that when you have an agent and loan packager involved, there's higher levels of defaults and fraud. So this is definitely on their radar scope.
Well, and the SOP 5010-5J, when it talks about fees, Bob, it talks about fees paid by the borrower. Again, you're correct. Doesn't talk about fees that you as a participant bank pay. to another party. But I do think that they have to be reasonable as well. And as a prudent lender, I think you look at that amount identified as max fees paid to the borrower and consider that.
And by the way, this is not just in the SBA lending world. Commissions are under scrutiny by all sorts of levels of regulators. There is a major lender in SBA who has done away with commissions for their business development officers and put them on a flat salary. Now, they need to perform, but they have moved away from that commission model. So this is something that we're going to be following. Very quickly, we love to follow what's happening in Main Street. NFIB came out with a story that said Main Street optimism is all-time historical highs. And we, again, we're in a cycle where everything's rocking and rolling. People are optimistic. Very quickly, we got a bunch more questions. I tell you what we're going to, let's see. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold these over for next week. These are great questions, and we'll do a 159 part due next week. Hey, we do this every Thursday at 1 o'clock. You can log on whenever you want. And Lance, we got over 200 people online. It's amazing. A couple plugs. If you're interested in the secondary market, we're doing an event in Washington, D.C. on December 4th. It's the only event focused on the secondary market for buyers, sellers, investors, and brokers. Finally, September 30th is deadline. These are our annual awards. Submit your nominations. These are all the awards that we have. Look at that under 40 crowd, the business development officers. We love to honor exceptional professionals. So log into SurveyMonkey, and it doesn't have to be complex, and we love to get your nominations. And these are the webinars that we're pushing. Lance is going to be doing a deferment workout next week, and of course, the one on October 10th on loan packaging referral fees, and we will expand more of that. And with that, I'm going to thank you all for joining us. We'll see you next Thursday at 1 o'clock Eastern. Thank you very much.
Have a good weekend.